And you moved from Infosys, you retired first and then Aadhaar came your way?
No, what happened was in 2009, in 2008, I wrote a book called Imagining India. So sort of projecting how India could be in the framework of ideas, why ideas matter and stuff like that. And among the ideas in that book was, digital ID and so on. So at the same time, the government was planning a digital ID program. And they had got cabinet approval for that project. And I had a chance to take up that role. So, and then my Infosys co-founders were very kind and said, yeah, you can go and do some national service. So that's how I ended up in Delhi in July of 2009 to build India's digital program.
Okay, so if we were to start the India Stack journey, I'm going to write it down because I'm learning with everybody who's going to watch this. So Aadhaar, first thing first. So the government asked you to build a digital ID.
No, the government asked me to build a unique ID.
A unique ID.
There was no digital in it.
Right.
I made it digital.
Right.
Because I said in 2009, if you're going to build an ID, it has to be a digital ID.
Okay.
It has to be online. It has to be verifiable online with real time and all that stuff. So those were the value add that my team and I did, was how do we execute this using a digital first way.
So in 2009, what was the benchmark you set for yourself while starting the Aadhaar project? Who were you looking at? Who had done well with the unique ID? Who had
Nobody had done it. So it was a brand new idea.
Is Social Security in America a similar concept? The
No,
numbers?
Social Security in America came in 1936.
Right.
Before technology. And in fact, the first use of mainframes was that. So mainframes were used because there was SSN. So SSN was a number, but it was a paper-based number.
Just tell us full forms of all of this, because...
Yeah, so SSN is Social Security number, which the US did, because what happened then was that Franklin Roosevelt, during the 30s, after the whole economic crisis in the US, they came out with a scheme where people could get benefits in their old age if they worked. And then they had to then keep track of a person throughout the age, right? Because they would contribute while they were working and they would get their benefits when they retired. So that's how they needed to have a number. That's how the SSN came about.
Is that the main purpose with which governments ideate unique IDs, benefit transfer? Is that the main?
No, benefits transfer is a big part of that. In our case, in the Indian case, there were two drivers. One was efficient benefits transfer, because since 2000, India has built more and more of welfare programs, which meant you send money to people. And they had to have a solid, robust way of doing it. So one part of this was to make benefit transfer more efficient, and therefore make government targeting more efficient for benefits. The second thing was an equally important driver, which was that most people didn't have IDs. Because in many societies, like in the West, 98% of births are in a hospital,
right,
and they get a birth certificate when they are born.
Right.
So that becomes the root document from which you can then get other documents. In India, births were not happening in a hospital. They were happening at home. They were happening in a village. So half the babies born in some states didn't have a birth certificate. So, which was fine as long as you lived in a particular area. But if you started moving around, migrating, going to the big city to enter a bus or to get a job, or if the policeman stopped you on the road, you had to show some ID. And most people didn't have an ID. So that was a very fundamental impediment for their progress. Right. So inclusion of people into the formal system with an ID and making benefits transfer more efficient were the government drivers of this initiative.
Right. And did the market play a large role in this process?
No, what we were looking at, how do you create digital infrastructure on which market or private innovation could be done.
Right.
So, and we call this as public rails and private innovation.
This is broadly DPI.
DPI. So but I mean, the ideas evolved, but it was actually, constructed on concepts like, on the internet. If you look at the internet was funded by the US government.
Right.
But on top of that, you had all these startup companies that came up, right? Similarly, GPS was again created by the US Department of Defense, but on top of that, we had, Uber and all these things, Ola and so on, Maps. So the notion that if you create a digital public infrastructure at population scale and open it up with application programming interfaces so anybody can build applications, then it will unleash innovation.
Right.
So that was the philosophy of the design of Aadhaar and subsequently UPI as API-led architecture which everybody could use. And then whether it's a startup or a large company, they could then build useful applications on top of it.
Right. And when you started on the Aadhaar project, this was 2009?
Yeah.
How long did it take?
Well, I was in the government for about 4.5 years.
Right.
And I had made a commitment that I would deliver 600 million people with Aadhaar by the time I quit. And I did that. So when I stepped down, I had 600 million people had an ID. And then, of course, it continued with the new government. And now 1.3 billion people have the ID.
So after Aadhaar came eKYC and eSign on top of it?
Yeah, no, Aadhaar was an ID that just said Nikhil is Nikhil.
Right. And this happened between 2009 and 13.
Yeah. And scaled up to 600 million.
Okay.
And with an online authentication. So you could go somewhere, put your finger and verify that Nikhil is Nikhil. You say, my number is 123 and the system would confirm that it is that. So we call that as online authentication.
Okay.
And then everyone's ID had had the name and address and date of birth and all that. That was considered sufficient KYC to open a bank account, get a mobile connection, or buy a...
What does Aadhaar have? Name, date of birth, mobile number, address.
Sex, email ID, and phone number. It's quite simple, but it was unique. A person could have only one number, which was the design was how to make it unique.
Right.
So then using the additional information in Aadhaar, you could do a KYC. And then the regulators agreed that this KYC was adequate to get a bank account or a mobile connection or buy a mutual fund or whatever.
How did that work? How did you convince the regulator to accept Aadhaar as a...
Yeah, so we had to first work with the government of India under the, many acts. Because at that time, Prevention of Money Laundering Act and there was lots of things happening. So we had to get it approved as a KYC in general. Then we had to work with each regulator. So we had to work with the RBI to get them to accept it for banks. We had to work with DOT and TRAI for mobile phones, IRDA for insurance, SEBI for capital markets. So we had to work with each regulator and we got all of them to accept it.
And how much time did that take?
That took maybe, it took several years, 2-3 years. But important thing was that the growth of that category happened at different times. For example, the use of Aadhaar KYC in banking happened after 2016 or 2015 rather. 2015 when Prime Minister Modi wanted to do the Jan Dhan Yojana program, which was to give bank accounts to everybody.
Right.
And that was a big push from the government to issue bank accounts to everyone. And Aadhaar KYC accelerated that because you could do a KYC immediately and get a bank account.
You mentioned somewhere that it brought down the time taken to give people bank accounts from 47 years to 9 years.
Yeah, so on the normal GDP, if you had looked at it, it will take 46 years to get to the level of banking penetration that we did in 9 years because you accelerated with digital technology.
eKYC was the reason for that?
Huh?
eKYC was the main reason for that?
I mean, there was political push, government push, customer demand. Banks had to execute. So a lot of things went into it. But the technological capability of doing a KYC online on the fly within 2 minutes reduced your transaction time and cost.
Right.
So it is an enabler. Same thing happened with mobile connections. So we launched Aadhaar KYC in say 2012-13, but it's only when Jio got launched in 2016 that they used Aadhaar KYC to enroll 1 million customers a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Because they wanted to get to 100 million customers in 6 months. The only way to do that was to use Aadhaar KYC. So they used it, and the rest was history, so to speak. So they popularized the use of Aadhaar KYC in mobile industry. So Jandan did it in banking, Reliance Jio did in mobile, and of course Zerodha did in capital market. So you guys used it to get...
No, we are big beneficiaries of
Yeah.
eKYC.